Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to be covering our wrong hot takes. That is our first impressions of games that we messed up. The things that we thought initially and we totally got it wrong. Whether we originally thought a game was great and then later realized that maybe it wasn't so great, or thought a game was not great and then ended up loving it. We're going to be talking about some of those. Before we get into that, as always, we have a poll question that we asked on social media this week, and it's relevant to this topic. So I asked people, how often does your first opinion of a game hold up after further plays? The options I gave were 90% plus, it rarely changes, and that got 14%. 75%, I usually get it right, and that got 67%. This is a little confusing with percentages on the answer and the results. 50%, I need more plays to be sure, got 18%, and then 25% or less, you can't judge a game on a first play, got 1%. And that was pretty bold of that 1% to answer that way when they're responding to a show that depends on first play, first play take. So how did you guys answer this?
My answer was I usually get it right. And I'm not sure that would be the same answer if I wasn't so used to judging games the first time I play them. I mean, that is kind of our shtick. And so I've sort of trained myself a little bit to really look for the things that I'm going to like or dislike in a game. But this list was a little bit difficult to make, in part because I think I generally do get a pretty good sense of how I'm going to like a game in the long term by the first play or two.
Yeah, I think I usually get it right also. I didn't actually answer it. That's what I would have put. And because there are some games that I think are a little more, what they say, obtuse or obscured. You can't tell necessarily, I can't tell necessarily what's going on. So you need to dig a little more through the weeds. And on those, I just generally don't give an opinion. I'm too scared to give an opinion. So I think part of it is because I'm not super opinionated one way or the other. And then part of it because, like Chris, I try to dissect these games, look for things that I enjoy, look for things that I don't enjoy. And the more we do this, I feel like the more I have a sense of what I like and what I don't like. But that's not to say I haven't been wrong a handful of times about a few games.
Well, I put 90% plus, it rarely changes. And I think I would have answered that. But as I was going through this topic this week, I couldn't find very many games that my opinion changed over multiple plays. And in most of the cases, and in fact, every single case I have, it was a game that I thought I loved on a first play and then pretty quickly got stale for me. So got, like less favorable. I didn't find any cases of games that I played, thought I didn't like it, and then went back and played it again and really liked it or changed my opinion drastically on it. That might be partially because I'm less likely to go out and try to play a game again that I didn't like the first time. I think most of the time I get it right. I'm going to read some listener comments here, but the reason I've been wanting to do this show for a while was to kind of revisit the whole premise of our show. And that is board game hot takes. We're basically giving our impressions right after we play a game, and it's oftentimes after the first play. So how useful is that for people? In my opinion, I think we're doing pretty good here, but let's see what some of our listeners think about having a first opinion on a game. Over on Blue Sky, Brian Lane said, I feel like it's very rare that my opinion changes after the first play, but there's usually a definitive moment within the first play that I'm aware that my opinion has become fully formed, especially when it's positive. And yeah, that happens to me a lot, although oftentimes it's like the first turn, I know I'm in love. And it's rarely that I get most of the way through the game before things start to click for me. Over on our Facebook group, Brian Chandler said, I went with 75%, partially because I picked up bad habits from you yahoos, and now I over-rely on my own stupid hot takes. The 25%, when I get it wrong, it's usually that I love play number one. I tell everyone to buy this amazing game, and after 3 more plays, I like it quite a bit less, which is kind of in line, I think, with I'm going to be talking about that a lot tonight. Maybe another reason to play new games all the time. Novelty for the win, he said. Aaron over on our Facebook group said, I only play games that are rated higher than a 7.0 on BGG. Then I watch a review and a playthrough. Then I read the rules. With all those data points, I'm rarely surprised with a dud. That's some great homework to do, and it works pretty well for me as well. My strategy is pretty darn close, Aaron. Deborah Torrenson said, I find it depends on the reason for my impressions on first play. Some games don't make enough of an impression to even get a first play. When they do, if the game requires a strong understanding of how different aspects, like different cards, etc., interact, a first play isn't enough to determine if I'll like the game. However, if something in the theme or a particular mechanic or component turns me off, additional plays are unlikely to change that response. I kind of agree with Deborah there. I mean, you could have a bad play of a game because of because of the group of people you play with. And you can have a really awesome play of a game, even if the game's not that great, just because you're having a great time with friends. First of all, I would recommend try to not play games with people that aren't great to play games with. That's a good starting point there. We're on topic here. So I guess let's just jump in a little bit. How did you guys make this list? And I want to be clear, when we're looking at our wrong hot takes, I wasn't only considering games that we've rated on the show or that we've ranked on the show, or so, even in some cases, games that I have not even talked about on the show. But I kind of looked back at every game I'd ever recorded plays on or that I recall playing. And, how did I feel about it at the start? And if I was really positive on it, did that change? Or if I was really negative on it, did that change? So that's kind of how I put my list together. What did you guys do here?
That was more or less the same thing that I did. I just went down the list of all the games that I'd played and thought about the ones that my opinion had changed the most on. And there was a relatively small number, like I alluded to before. But honestly, I found this list really unpleasant to make. And the reason for that is because I generally don't like talking bad about games. I think we've all kind of made that comment before. And overall, I would say it's probably a lot more common, like you said, Tim, to have a game that I liked the first play, and then after a play or two, I kind of got over it. And so I found it easier to pull down games out of the list that I liked less than I used to. But there were a few that I found that I liked more than I had liked on the first play. And so I tried to be pretty even-handed on the list by putting, like maybe half, I think a little more than half.
Yeah.
It's 5. I
so
guess
I don't like the math game,
of games that I liked better on second play. Or
you got your math down, Chris.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty good at this. It's a few more games of Sentient here, and I'll be able to do some long division. I got a few games that I liked better and a few games that I liked worse. So, but overall, I probably more common to go down than to go up.
This is like some sort of strange personality test. I was kind of the opposite of you guys. I was sort of mediocre on a lot of these games, and a lot of games that I picked I liked a lot better now as time went on. So I was kind of neutral or down on them a little bit at first, but 4 out of my 5 here are ones that I am pleasantly surprised about or was wrong initially in the negative, and now I feel a lot more positive about them.
Yeah, that is going to be really interesting to hear how this goes, because I think I guess everybody kind of has to, take their own path on how they perceive games to start and how that grows with them. But well, let's see how it goes. Chris, what's your number 5? What's the first game that your opinion changed on after your first impression?
My number 5 is El Grande, designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Robert Ulrich and published by Hans im Glück Games. That's a game that when we played it and did our review, I was asked the question, would you play this again? And I said, heck yeah, I'd play this game again. Lots of fun. I think we played 1 or 2 games of it on BGA after that. And I got over that game so fast, it was unbelievable. I mean, on the one hand, it's got a theme that's about as exciting as a mud puddle. And in terms of the mechanics, it's definitely showing its age. It also has this one problem that I found as I have progressed and played a lot more games, that there's a certain type of area control that I really don't like, where you're just throwing down masses of like, hey, I'm going to throw down 5 guys in this spot, and I'm going to throw down 3 guys in this spot. And then, it's really about the majority in the space. And someone can just drop in a few people, a few meeples, and knock you out, ruin your game. And there's this the fluidity of that area majority kind of thing. I just don't enjoy that much. I much more enjoy area control or area majority in a place where there's more opportunity for combat strategy. And I always come back to Blood Rage, where you don't have to have the most power, you don't have to have the most strength, but you can do clever things that are going to get you the win in the end. And this one is just such basic throw guys down until you can win, until you've got the majority, that it doesn't keep my interest. And between that and the lack of an exciting theme, I just don't want to play it anymore.
Chris, I am right there with you on this one. This one didn't make my list, but hearing you talk about it, and after we played, I was like, yeah, this game's pretty good. It's got some great potential, but something about it hasn't sat right as I've distanced myself from it. And I think it is like, having these 7, 8 guys out there. Now Tim has 12 guys in this territory. Okay, and now I just lost all these guys in that territory. And I think there is some nuance with the card play. And the more you play, you're going to be, realize what to do and this and that. But you're right. It just doesn't have that charm, that appeal that a lot of these other area control games do have for me.
Yeah, I disagree on this one, but again, it's been a while since I played it. I have some local friends that are really anxious to get this back to the table, and I'm excited. I can't wait to play it some more. I remember all of my plays of it being really fun, so we'll see how it holds up for me, but interesting pick, Chris.
Yeah, now I kind of want to, I just saw that stuff, but now I want to try it again and see what the deal is.
Did you guys see there's a new production coming out too? Like there's a new upgraded, and I like the look of it. Some people are complaining that they don't like it, but I think it's an improvement. The map colors and, just the quality of the production, everything looks cooler to me. So I want to try it.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment about lipstick on a pig, but I really don't feel that badly about it.
Jeez.
That's going to be our first 1-star review in a while, Chris. Thanks a lot.
No, I really don't dislike it that much.
My number 5 game is Heat, Pedal to the Metal. This is a game by Days of Wonder, art by Vincent Dutray, and the designers here are Asger Harding Granerud, Daniel Skjold Peterson. Sorry. Anyway, this game was one that we played on Board Game Arena initially, and it was okay. Race cars and some little bit of deck management, hand management, card management going through. And you have this weird thing where there's like heat in your engine, but you kind of want it there so you can use it to cool off later. And it goes in your deck. So it's kind of like the exhaustion cards in that
Flamme Rouge.
Flamme Rouge. Thank you, Tim. But anyway, the more we played this one, mostly Chris and I have been playing this one on Board Game Arena, and we added some of the expansions in there. So you can have this draft where you're drafting parts for your car that will help with cornering speed, or it gives you an option to go either 1 space or 4 spaces. So you have an option of where you're going to land approaching that corner. And so there's just a lot more choices with this draft. And then we have this other sort of circuit. So we do 3 races and kind of total the points as we go. I thought that was pretty neat. And in that mode, you get to keep a card each time. So your car gets better from race to race to race. Just a lot of neat additions you could do with Heat, Pedal to the Metal. And the more I thought about this heat management with your engine, that was really neat to me too. That's a different kind of mechanism that was really fun. I thought this is the other kind of draft where you're drafting in someone's slipstream, in someone's wind. So not the car draft, but the car drafting versus the adrenaline. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Wait, did you say car drafting or card drafting?
Right.
Car. Which one did you mean? Did you mean
race
car drafting?
Drafting off the back of a race car in its little strip stream is what I'm talking about. This kind of drafting. So how are you going to use that? Because some of these cards you get a little extra race car draft. So you have to decide how to use that with your adrenaline modifier. You're going to use your adrenaline first, then you can get right behind the car. Then you can launch 4 ahead or 2 ahead or 1 ahead, depending on what card. So a lot of options, a lot of fun choice, a lot more nuance come out of the game when you add all of these other cars to them. I've been having a lot of fun with Heat, Pedal to the Metal, after my initial sort of neutral take on it.
Great choice, Adam.
Yeah, that's cool, Adam. I did try it a couple more times and didn't love it, but I didn't play with all those modules either. And this kind of goes back to my stance last week, in that we really should probably try to play with more advanced, and extra modules the first time we play games, so we get the full experience of it instead of trying to just ease into a game. And it's just like a lot of games we only get to play once or twice. So why not just try the full experience? It's not like it's that complicated or anything. So, but I'll keep playing this one occasionally. I think it's a completely fine game. Maybe it'll grow on me eventually.
Completely fine. All right.
All right. Well, my first one, and kind of my whole list here, I would say it starts at the top and goes down, are games that I loved at first, and they definitely have not stuck with me, but none of them are bad. These are all solid games that I would happily play again. And some of them, as we go down the list, you're going to get ones that I like less and less. So
can I just say, Tim, this is why it's dangerous to listen to you on Board Game Hot Takes. You get so excited about all of these games. When you play them first, you're like, you got to try this game. This game's amazing. I'm like, dude, Tim loves this game. It must be great. So I go and I'm like, yeah, that game was okay. I can see, And then 3 weeks later, he sold it already at his little local game market. I'm like, what the heck, Tim? What are you telling me this game's so great for? Anyway,
tonight, Tim's bringing the sad list.
Well, listen, to be completely fair, there were only 2 games on here of all the 100 or 150 or so feature reviews we've done. There are only 2 games I have on my list where my opinion changed pretty drastically. Okay. So the other 3 on my list are games that we never featured or I barely talked about on the show. So don't worry, if you've been listening to the show for the last 3 years, my opinion is perfect almost all the time. All right. The first one is a fairly recent review we did earlier last year, and that was Endless Winter Paleoamericans. Now, again, this is a completely fine game, but I remember my first play of it, I found so much fun exploring the systems in this game. And then I got the game, and then I played a solo game to kind of relearn it. And I was like, wow, that wasn't that exciting, but maybe it's because it was solo. And then we all played it together in Sedona, and I just found the game one of the weaker points of the whole weekend that we played. Like, it just didn't stand out to me. So not a bad game at all. I would happily play it. It's a decent midweight Euro with some cool artwork. But for some reason, after that first round of exploration, I just didn't find it that exciting to come back to, versus some of its peers that have similar mechanisms that I still absolutely love to this day. You know, games like Lost Ruins of Arnak and Dune Imperium, which shares that worker placement and you know, deck building aspects of it. Endless Winter just didn't stick with me. So that was one of the reviews that I really gave high marks to, got really excited about, and then it fell flat pretty quickly after my first play.
You know, Tim, this is one game that I almost had on the list for the exact same reason that you did. I'm with you on that one.
Well, somewhere in a dusty box on a corner of some shelf, Chief Thunderpaw is shedding a few tears.
Thunderpaw, sad. All right. So number 4, I've actually got, this is my one cheat. I'm putting 2 games here, but I'm putting 2 games for a couple of reasons. One, because of the overlap in designers. One is that they are both games that I like better. So we're going from Tim's frowny face to Chris's happy face. And they're both games that I had a similar kind of dilemma with after we had the reviews. The first one is Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar, designed by Simone Luciani and Danielle Tascini and published by Czech Games Edition. And the second is Teotihuacan, City of Gods, designed by Danielle Tascini and published by NSKN Games. These are both games that when we first played them, I felt very conflicted. I had things I liked and things I didn't like. And if you think of it like on a bell curve, Tzolk'in, I think, was just on the positive side of the bell curve, but I wasn't sure. And Teotihuacan was just on the negative side of the bell curve. But for both of them, I felt like I can't give a real strong feeling on this one way or the other. It's going to take more plays. Now, after having played both of them a bunch of times, they are some of my favorite games. I own Tzolk'in right now, and I've backed the deluxe master edition of Teotihuacan and had an absolutely great time playing that game. Both of these are awesome games. I love them. It's not surprising to me because the designers are ones that I routinely enjoy their games, and the theme here is very interesting. The art is interesting. There's so many good things about this game. Both of these games. One thing I want to add that I thought was actually pretty hilarious, for the ones that we did reviews, I went back and listened to my final take on it, do I want to play it again? And for Teotihuacan, Adam was like, heck yeah, I want to play this one again. And now he's like, I hate this game. So that one maybe should have made Adam's list if it's not on there. Maybe we'll hear about it later, and maybe he just forgot about that one.
Well, we played this one again in Sedona, and I just remember like, it just got tedious. It's just giant rondel of little tiny Excel spreadsheets, and I don't want to work out this problem every time I go around, and like blah blah blah. It's so boring, dude. So boring.
Adam was like so sad playing this game. I thought you were gonna like start sobbing. You hated this game so much.
I forgot about how horrible that one was.
Great picks, Chris. I thought one of these or both of them might make your list because I do remember your opinions changing. In fact, this is these reviews. If you go back and listen to them, this is the best example of why we shouldn't do hot take reviews, because Chris just cannot form a strong opinion on a first play.
I'm going to go on to my number 4 game. I was initially, again, neutral on this. This is Soul, Last Days of a Star. I was very neutral. That's why I hold out hope that Tim may someday like this game so much, because for me too, it's weird. It's a weird game. You got these weird mechanisms. You have to fly these little tiny spaceships around and put them in the right formation in order to take another action to build this structure. And then you have to fly these spaceships around again to this structure in order to activate them. And then you're drawing these cards out of a deck, which is like the timers or a supernova card. And then you only get to keep one of these cards, even though you draw 7 of them out. And then all this crazy stuff happens supernova. So there's some weird mechanisms, some weird movement, weird spatial thing to construct a building. Is it weird or is it unique? And it's a little bit of both. So all of these mechanisms, you don't see this in a lot of other board games. So it is super unique, and it's a little bit uncomfortable at first, but the more you get comfortable with these mechanisms, the more you see how slick this game is and how streamlined it is. And I think it's one of these really super elegant games once you get into it and figure out how this all combines together. And it is so unique that you get that feeling of uncomfortability until you get comfortable with it. So that's why it took me 3, 4, 5 times. I played this one with the group of guys over at Dad's on a Map. One time we had an online play, 5 of us, and the interaction was great. Just some of the little stories that came out, people using this guy's building and flying their energy node producer into the sun for points instead of letting somebody else use it. So all kinds of crazy stuff that can happen, all with this very intense, tense countdown mechanism of, is a star about to go supernova and destroy everybody except the one in the lead with the most points. So that's why Soul came back for me as one of my favorite games after I was a little down on it, thought it was weird, thought it was just a little uncomfortable. But yeah, I love this one now. Soul, Last Days of a Star.
Well, after 3 plays, it still hasn't improved for me, and I'm happy to try it again. But I don't think it's a problem with the game. I got a chance to play another game that, not the same, but really Soul Last Days of a Star is kind of an abstract, what would you call it? Like it has a lot to do with like where you're placing stuff on the board and moving things around on a board, right? It's like in a way chess, like even though it has a lot more theme kind of painted onto this chessboard that you're interacting with. And I got to play Boop, the classic serious game of Boop this week. Anyway, Boop is a recent light 2-player kind of abstract chess-like game as well. And I didn't enjoy it at all. And it's not, I don't think it was a bad game. I think for people that like that type of abstract kind of, placing stuff on a board and moving them and trying to think 3 or 4 turns ahead of just where do you move these pieces around a board, I think it's probably great. And I think Soul, maybe that's why I don't like it. It feels the same. It feels like 4 turns ahead to just plan on where I'm going to move a piece. And it's just not fun for me. So I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's just me.
Dude, I don't know what that word salad was all about, but it was like soul, and then there's chess, and then he started saying boop, and Tim, what are you talking about? What?
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim. You do have to think ahead. I find for this game, just like Scythe, you have to think 1 turn ahead. At least 1 turn. And that's all I do for this game is pretty much, I think, 1 turn ahead. What am I going to do this turn? How am I going to arrange these guys so I can set up next turn? This guy will be here, and then I can get my energy. So yeah, I totally agree. You do have to get in that 1 or 2 turns ahead mindset, kind of like I have to do, at least for Scythe. What am I doing now? What am I going to do on my next turn? Because I can't do the same turn next time. So the think ahead is there.
Not like I'm an expert on board games or anything, but I think all the games we play require you to think a turn or 2 ahead. I mean, that is sort of the nature of the hobby.
Yeah, for sure. And also, Scythe is actually a fun game, so that's a weird comparison. But speaking of Stonemaier games, my number 4 on my list is Red Rising. And Red Rising was a game that the first couple times we played it right when the pre-release got announced. It was out on Tabletopia, so we kind of got an early review in. And I was just taken with this game. I love the variety and I love the interesting decisions. I'm a big fan of Fantasy Realms as a silly little filler game. And Red Rising, with the mechanisms are kind of based on that, but it's a meatier game. It's weightier. And I liked all the stuff it added, all the little bit of area control, the push and pull that came in there and all that stuff. So I loved my first couple of plays. I loved having that hand of 7 cards and just like the craziness of trying to figure out what cards were the best to try to work with and what you wanted to play with. And then after another half dozen or so plays of it, there's one mechanism that is totally out of place in this game. There are some cards you can play, rare ones that will take cards out of the other person's hand, and rare ones where you can draw additional cards. I'm not a big person on balance. I'm not a big person on like saying, hey, that card's broken, but I think that mechanism in the game really doesn't work. It's kind of broken. It feels like if somebody takes a card out of my hand, I have almost no chance of competing. And so that just took a lot of fun for me out of the game. If that hadn't been there, I think I would still be enjoying it today, because I do like the variety and I like that every game is a fun little tactical puzzle. You just got to see what somebody else plays down and pick something else up. So again, not a bad game, and it's a game I'd be happy to play again, but it lost its luster after playing about a half dozen times or so and realizing that mechanism just made me feel helpless once I got half a game into it.
Well, I'm going to agree with you a second time here, Tim. That was another one that I almost put on the list for different reasons. I think for me, it was more that I really enjoyed the game at first. It was kind of fun. And I was thinking about it in my mind as a sort of comparison to Fantasy Realms. And I really dislike Fantasy Realms. And this one, I think, is much better than Fantasy Realms. It adds those other elements, those other mechanisms. It also added in some really cool art, and I enjoyed the Red Rising book series. And so I think I had a pretty positive impression of it in comparison to Fantasy Realms. But the reality is, I just don't like that set of mechanisms that much. I just don't like Fantasy Realms. So I think I was a little bit overly enthusiastic because I was expecting Fantasy Realms and got something better than that. But overall, I agree with your conclusion.
Yeah, I was enthusiastic about this one too. I own a copy. I still have a copy sitting here. And not a bad game, just nothing that's overly exciting. And yeah, Tim, that is rough having a card pulled from you, or if someone gets an additional card, then there's only like 4 or 5 of the cards out of, 200, 250 cards that do that. So they so rarely show up that if you get one, it's pretty powerful.
All right. Well, my number 3 is a game that we've already heard about once tonight, and it is Heat Pedal to the Metal. Adam, I don't remember. Did you give the publisher and the designers and all that?
I did. Eventually I got there, yeah.
You did? Okay. Then I won't give them again. But this game, I had a pretty mediocre opinion of it the first time that we played it. I felt like it was heavier than it needed to be. I felt like it was longer than it needed to be. And I felt like it dragged. And I think this is one of the at least for me, pretty rare games where future plays where you know it better and the turns move a little bit more quickly, it made a huge difference in this game. Also playing it on BGA where the computer does all of the upkeep for you really helps this game as well. But I'm not talking about just BGA plays, because I've played this now 4 or 5 times in real life with friends who have the game and really enjoy it. In fact, I even played this one with my wife at our the last game night. And afterwards, she said to me, "So Chris, that racing game, that wasn't terrible," which is her code for I like this game. and I completely get it. This game has grown on me so much. And I think once you get it and once you're able to move quickly through the turns, it flies. It's like a car race. And the degree to which they pulled in the mechanisms of the game and built that into this racing theme, it's so heavily thematic and it works so well. The idea of using the heat as a resource, you can squander it, you can use it wisely. All of that just flows so nicely. And I love this game now. This game is actually one that I'm debating whether to buy a copy. I haven't bought one yet because I'm trying to buy a few games until I get rid of some of my older ones, but I can see this one actually entering my physical collection very soon here.
Yeah, I gushed about it already, but I'll add in the different racetracks are pretty neat too. Something to think about each time and how you're going to manage these straights and the corners all add to the appeal here.
Yep.
Next up for me, I have a game that I went more negative on than my initial thoughts on it. So this is Anachrony. Designers here are David Turtzi, Richard Amon, and Victor Peter by Mindclash Games. This is a game, I bought it. I bought the Kickstarter. They got the huge box. You probably heard the story if you've listened. And I was like, it's too much stuff. What am I going to do with this thing? Tim wanted to check it out, or he just straight up bought it. And I brought that out to Tim's house. We punched it, organized it over the course of 2 hours or 3 hours, watched the excellent game explainer, Knights Around a Table, explain this one. And then we played it, and it's fantastic at 2 players. We played it twice. We got one of the expansions out. We're putting these little power packs in these giant mechs where these little workers go in. Different types of workers are able to do different stuff. So at 2 players, I absolutely love this game. And we started playing it at 3 players and 4 players. And I feel like this thing just gets bogged down. The action choices go away quickly, a little more chaotic. I felt a little less control. I wasn't able to do a lot of the actions I wanted to do. I know that's part of worker placement, your priority stuff, but I don't know what it was about this game at more than 2 players. It really, really soured for me, which is unfortunate because you want a game like this to be fun and flow around the table and go quickly. But man, I'll play it at 2, but anything else more than that, I'm going to be very hesitant to play Anachrony.
It's so interesting you mentioned Anachrony because I finally got a chance to play Tricarion Legends of Illusion this week, which is another Mind Clash game, which I've always wanted to play. So like, I still like Anachrony a lot, but I think my opinion is evolved along with yours in that the first play was amazing. It blew my mind. There's so many choices, so many decisions to make. But after half a dozen plays, it was kind of like, this is still interesting decisions, but it's kind of the cycle of the game. You know, it's doing the same thing. Things aren't changing drastically. I can kind of tell exactly how the rest of the game is going to go. So I got to play Tricarion Legends of Illusion this week, and I was blown away. One of my favorite game experiences ever. Super heavy, took 4 hours to play. I loved every moment of it. But what I think is going to happen is the same thing with Anachrony, is that if I played it 3 or 4 more times, it's going to be like I'm putting a lot of time into making things where the game, you know, kind of the cycle of the game, the life cycle is going to feel the same almost every time you play it. Not that that doesn't still create interesting decisions. And Voidfall did the same thing for me. So I think Mind Clash does an amazing job of creating really thematic games that have a lot of complexity, and they create a wonderful discovery experience the first couple times you play them. But all of their games, what you get in that complexity that creates discovery, you lose it in the fact that the flow doesn't really evolve. There's something about it that just doesn't change over time. So I'll be talking more about Tricarion in an upcoming episode for sure, because I have a lot of thoughts about it. Really loved it, but it reminded me. I finished the game and I was like, "This is my favorite Mind Clash game." But then I thought back to my first experience with Anachrony, and I was like, "This was one of my favorite game experiences the first time I played it." And same thing with Voidfall, but all of them after a few plays start to feel kind of a little bit rote, even though they're so complex and have a ton of variability in them. So interesting choice, Adam. I'm not too surprised by this, and it's definitely fallen for me a little bit, even though I do still really like the game.
Yeah. So Tim, given what you just said, I can't tell if this is one you think you might get or not, or just not get it because it sounds like somebody you know has it.
Oh, I will never get it because it will never get played again. Just like Anachrony, just like Cerebria, just like Voidfall. And that I don't need another heavy game. They're great games. Again, they're great to explore one time if you're willing to put the time in. And if I was retired, or if I was like 20 years old and not married and just had a ton of free time, these games would be great because you could get together with your friends every other weekend and bust out one of these things and just get into it. And then there's a tight competition. I don't have the time for more heavy games like this, but Tricarion was fantastic. I'm so glad I experienced it. I'll probably never play it again. But again, I'll talk more about that soon. All right. Well, my number 3 on this list was Star Wars Outer Rim. This was designed by Corey Konieczka, Tony Fanchi, and published by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, this shouldn't have surprised me because this is Fantasy Flight in a nutshell, and that they make really thematic games that are kind of fiddly and not too fun to return to for me. So the first time I played Star Wars Outer Rim, I did play it solo. I bought the game. It was on sale on Game Nerds a couple of years ago. I always wanted to try it. I picked it up. I played it. I was like, this is so fun. You're exploring the galaxy. You're having these encounters all the time. You're picking up these cool devices. You're bounty hunting these great characters from the Star Wars universe. You're upgrading your ship. You're doing all this stuff. And I loved it. And then the first time I played it with more than one person, like 3 people, which was with Adam actually in Long Beach, and it just kind of dragged. It's like turns are long. You know, every person has like 3 actions they can do on their turn, so the turns are taking a long time. And I was like, okay, 3 is too many. So I played it a couple times at 2. I got the expansion. So those of you who think that the expansion fixes everything, it does add. It's nice. It's got some nice variety, but eventually it's just too slogged down with like too many actions in a turn, too many things you're doing, too much text you're reading. So it's a cool thematic experience. On my first play, thought it was awesome. It went down pretty fast for me and got really boring. So I sold it. But yeah, Star Wars Outer Rim, you know, Fantasy Flight does theme. They do theme. I don't know that they do it well for game mechanisms, for a fun, exciting game experience, but they do theme.
Well, that's making me want to uncover Zia, Embers of a Forsaken Star, and get that one out and see how that, because that's one that gets compared a lot. So it'll be a lot of rolling and moving and sitting around watching people do their turns. Maybe someday it'll happen.
All right. Well, my number 2 is a big change for me. And the last 2 are probably my most dramatic changes in opinion over time. And my number 2 is another frowny face, and it was Dungeon Pets, designed by Vlada Chvátil and published by Czech Games Edition. I went back and listened to my final take on this one from our review episode, and I was pretty doggone excited about this one. I thought it was really cool. I like Vlada Chvátil. I like playing through the ages. That's one of my favorite games, even though Adam always beats me at it. And so I had a really high opinion of this. I mean, this was going to be an exciting one. And then we started playing it on BGA. And the things that I identified as being the problems during our review just ended up killing it for me. This is one where the planning, and I'll call it the economy, that's the wrong word, because it's getting the right things to take care of your pets and not having them all die or get evil or attack you or whatever, felt so tight that I was constantly frustrated that I never felt like I was able to ever actually do anything. Maybe I just sucked at the game. I don't know. But after several plays of this game felt way too complicated for me, way too little fun for me. And it quickly made it from a game that I was playing routinely on BGA to one of the very few games that I tell people, don't invite me to that game anymore because I just don't want to play it. So sad to say. Again, sorry, Vlada, but this is just one that I couldn't stick with.
This is the one I got invited to a few times to play with you guys on Board Game Arena. I didn't make that night that you guys reviewed it. And it just felt like I had a high barrier to entry with the rules. It was very complex for trying to raise some dragons in a little dragon zoo village. So I haven't done this one, and I don't think I'll ever go back to it.
It sounds like Chris does not he never liked to take care of his Tamagotchi, did he? I bet they all died. I bet those poor digital pets are sitting in a drawer somewhere with their batteries dead at this point. I adore Dungeon Pets. I still love it after that play. I played it dozens of times, and I just absolutely love this game. I've never had a chance to play in real life. I was at a seller's market recently, and somebody was selling a copy for like $20, and I wanted to pick it up, but it is a high barrier to entry. It's complicated for the kind of the silly wackiness of the game. So nobody's ever going to want to play this game with me. So I didn't pick it up. It doesn't need to sit on my shelf collecting dust, but I like this game a lot. I think it's a blast, even though it is very painful, very, very punishing.
I think not buying that was a great choice, Tim.
Okay, my number 2 game that I've 180'd on, this is Quacks of Quedlinburg. This is a game we played it on, I don't know if it was TTS or whatever, and it was okay at the time. I thought it was kind of goofy, a little wacky, throwing all these little chits into this fake bag on TTS and whatever. I didn't really get that into it. And then Chris, Steve, and I played this one in Portland. I don't know if it was Chris's version or Steve's, but it was a nice version. We had these different sets of chit powers, we'll call them. And I really liked the strategies in it that these different chips offered. So I think I already said, I initially just thought it was just kind of goofy. But then watching Chris go after this kind of return on investment strategy, I forget what the chip power was or what exactly it did, but the more these things he got, the stronger he got, and he had some choices. So sort of, you always have the choice of whether to stop drawing chips or keep going and push your luck. But there was something if you ended on the right color of chip. So a few more options or a few more benefits for ceasing to pull more chips out of the bag than just, am I going to get over this point threshold or not? So watching Chris do that strategy, and then Steve had this whole other strategy. You guys were neck and neck. I remember watching you guys, like, you guys know what you're doing. I was just kind of doing whatever with my chips. I thought, well, if I have a mix with this and this and this, no, that didn't do anything. That was pretty lackluster. But watching you guys really go after it and pushing your luck just right, and the strategy sort of emerge out of this, what is a really fun, goofy mechanism, Quacks of Quedlinburg really came to life for me that last time we played it up in Portland.
That's awesome. Quacks is such a fun game. I still get this played all the time. I absolutely love it. Super fun game. I'm glad you like it now.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. And I'm not like a huge patriot for this game. I mean, I've played it one time, and it was that one play that we all had together. But I remember the episode that you guys reviewed that I wasn't on. And it was the one where you did Quacks and Cubidos. And I remember you not liking it that much. And so I was actually kind of skeptical when we went into it. And I had a lot of fun playing it. So I'm hoping we get a chance to play that one again.
Your first problem with that, Chris, is trusting Adam.
So basically now in this episode, Tim has said, don't trust Adam and don't trust Chris.
The designers here for Quacks are, one designer, Wolfgang Warsch, art by Dennis Lohausen, who is an artist on my remaining game as well.
Well, we'll see if that one's a good or a bad one.
We'll see.
All right. Well, this is a game that I don't think I've ever talked about, or if I have, I've barely talked about it. And this is a classic game, the grandmother of all deck builders, and that is Dominion. This was the first introduction to the current modern deck building mechanism. And this was designed by Donald X. Vaccarino and published by Rio Grande Games at the time. Way back in 2008, when I was a big Magic the Gathering player, but not super into board games, my brother, Steve, who you've heard on the show before, he was into board games. And so I went to a local game store and said, what should I get my brother? He loves games. What should I get him? And they said, Dominion. This is the hottest game right now. You got to check this game out. So I bought it. I brought it home, gave it to him at Christmas, family Christmas gathering, and we played it. And I fell in love immediately. You just think about the idea of going through a deck building game for the first time that's pure deck building, and it was just joy. It was like, holy cow, that I just added that to my deck, and now that came up later, and I got this cool combo turn that came up. Absolutely loved it. So it was on my mind for years, and when I kind of got out of Magic the Gathering and started getting into like your kind of modern, tabletop board gaming back in like 2016, 2017, this was one of the first games that I acquired. I was like, okay, I need to revisit that game. And I really enjoyed it. I played it a lot. My wife and I played it, introduced it to friends. But as I started to get introduced to a lot of more modern mechanisms, the deck building and the theme of Dominion started to get really stale pretty quickly. The complete lack of kind of a rotating market in a game so that everyone's playing with the same market of 10 cards, it just felt outdated. And it still feels outdated. I really don't like playing Dominion. The last few plays that I've had of it were just dull. They're just boring to me, even though I still love this mechanism. And you can mix it up. You can add all kinds of expansions in. I've tried several of them, and I'll play this game because it's completely fine. The only way I've actually found a lot of joy in this game not too long ago is my mom got into it, but I was getting tired of playing with my parents. I took their set, and instead of just putting the 10 sets of cards out, I blended all the cards together and made a big rotating market like Star Realms, where you just pull random cards off the top of the deck. That was awesome. That was super fun again. So I think Dominion it was a great intro to deck building. I'm so glad the game exists because it made one of my favorite mechanisms, created a whole lineage of fantastic games. But Dominion is fired.
Tim, what a journey you took me on. You started off, you were so high on Dominion. Everything was going so great there. And then it just all slow. It wasn't even a quick death. It was a slow death of Dominion. And at the end, it was just a tragedy, man. Oh, I'm like, it almost brought me to tears with that story, man. I was like so happy for you at first. And then
I at least feel like that hot take was justified. It was a hot take that at the time it was groundbreaking. It felt unique. It felt exciting. And I think it was deserved. But it ran its course. So I think that was a valid journey.
This week on a very special Board Game Hot Takes, the death of a love affair. Right? So here we are, number one, the top of the list. And we're going to end on a happy note. I'm going to give you guys another smiley face here. And this is the biggest one. This is the one that still kind of like shakes me to my core that I actually ended up changing this much on this game. And it is Gaia Project, designed by Jens Drogenmuller and Helga Ostertag and published by Fjörland Spiel. When we did our review of this game originally, I had no love for it. It was too complicated. It was boring. It was this, it was that. It was not my game. It was not my game. And I know you guys loved it. And it almost became a joke how much I disliked that game. And I think we maybe played it once or twice on BGA over time. And I didn't pick it up very quickly, and I ended up getting my butt kicked really bad multiple times. And so I liked this game even less and less. And it was almost, like I said, an inside joke, or not even an inside joke. It was a very obvious joke how much I disliked Gaia Project. And I don't know what happened. There was one point where I said, these guys talk about this game so much and enjoy it so much. I had to jump in and learn it and give it a shot. And I started playing it on BGA, and then I started playing it on BGA with you guys again, and something blossomed. I think I just got it. There was something that clicked, and the light went on, and all of a sudden, I could see the beauty that you guys saw the whole time that was not obvious to me at all, that was completely obscured to me when we first started playing the game. And now I love it. I love Gaia Project. It is a great game. I think this one truly did require gaining some expertise at it, because if you're playing against people who know this game and you don't know the game, you're going to get your butt handed to you every single time in the most embarrassing way. And so you really do have to get it a little bit. Now that I've gotten it, at least some, I think I've won maybe 1 or 2 games out of the bunch that we've played, but at least I feel like I can be somewhat competitive and understand what's happening. And now I appreciate all those intricacies that really turned me off the first time we played it. So 3 cheers for Gaia Project.
Chris, this is also my number 1 game that I turned around on, Gaia Project.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to jump on your bandwagon here. Initially, the art was kind of a bummer, but I'd heard so many good things. This resource management game where you're having all these different opportunity costs. Are you going to do this at the cost of doing this? Are you going to take this and doing that? The more I played it, the more it revealed itself to me. I was bad too for a while. I would play against him and you just get your butt kicked 60 points. You're like, how's he breaking 150 over there? And it'd just be demoralizing. But the mechanisms, the faction powers, some of the highlights for me, the faction powers, the way those play with the game systems. Last time was a faction that uses the Gaia formers to gain QICs. There's factions that encourage clever power token management. Each faction almost encourages you to play around with a different system in the game, in turn making you better at the game itself. So I really like how, I don't know, each faction is like a tutorial for a different part of the game. I think that's a pretty clever way to do it. And you can discover a lot of these things. And once you do have that moment, Chris, that click, that blossoming moment, you start to see how things are going to stack together. Because otherwise it feels super tight and like you can't do anything until you find that way through and stuff starts to open up and you have this explosion of points. It feels so good when you get that game where you've planned out everything just right and you're getting 150 points, 170 points, getting up close to 200 points. What a cool game, Gaia Project. What a neat evolution Gaia Project has for me, playing it over and over and over and seeing how that thing emerges in the things you can do.
Adam, I love what you said about the different factions being sort of like tutorials for different parts of the game, because I think you really hit the nail on the head there. There are still some factions that I don't play because they're the parts of the game that they rely on that I don't really get as much. And so I think you're absolutely right. And it's really, I had never thought about it that way before, but that's a fascinating way to look at it. And I think it's very true.
Amazing, guys. I'm so excited that you guys both love this game. Still one of my favorites of all time. And it's awesome. Also, Chris has been getting very competitive with this game. It's very hard to beat him these days. So it's just very cool.
I think the last 2 that it's been us 3, Chris has taken them both. Now we can't beat Chris. He's crushing us.
Well, cool. I'm going to end on a low note since you guys ended on high notes here. But this is a game, again, that I've never reviewed on the show. I don't think I've ever even talked about on the show. And this is a fairly well-loved game that's out of print and has been for a while. And this is a game called Ethnos. This was designed by Paleoamericans, who actually designed one of my favorite games in Libertalia. This is a kind of a set collection game. It's set in a fantasy world. It's got a map, and the map has different regions on the board. And each of the regions, it's played over 3 rounds, and each of the regions, kind of like Wonderland's War, has a token that shows you how many points the region is worth for controlling it at the end of each round. So, the first round, a region might give you 2 points, but the next round it might be 6 and the next might be 10. So you're kind of motivated to try to put these tokens out on the board. But the way you do this is collecting these fantasy races. And I think one of the gimmicks of the game, the things that got me excited early, is the fact that there's like, a dozen fantasy races in the game and you play with 4 of them or 5 of them each game. So every game, it feels like it's going to play out different. And the way it works is on your turn, you're basically picking up 2 cards, either out of a market or off the top of a deck. And when you have a set large enough that matches a region color on the board, you play that set, or you can play the set. And the set is going to give you some ability that matches that fantasy race. But also, depending on the size of the set, you're going to get a certain number of points. And the points match up almost exactly like Ticket to Ride's train set points. 1 is going to give you 1 point, 2 is going to give you 3 points, 3 is going to give you 6 points, etc. And so it was exciting to explore a couple times because the races felt drastically different. Okay, if I collect these things and do this thing, then I'm going to get points. Plus, the area control seemed really dynamic and fun. Like, okay, if I ignore this region this round, I can do that, but I got to rush it next round while it's worth more points. So I like those different elements of it. But after a few plays, 2 things became apparent. Number one, I don't like set collection, and not when the game is all based around set collection. And this game is literally like most of your turns is just draw 2 cards. It's so boring. That's why I don't like Ticket to Ride 2. It's just boring. You just draw 2 cards. Most of your turns, you're just drawing 2 cards. And most of the time, it's just random luck what you got off the top of the deck if it matches your turn. The second part is that pretty quickly I realized that the races don't matter at all. Just keep drawing until you get to 6 cards of a certain color or whatever the maximum set size is, and then play that set. And you're going to get more points from having that large set than you would ever get from any of the abilities of the races or from going for area control or anything like that. So I really love this game for the first half dozen or so plays of it. And then once I started to realize those were the strategies, it got very, very dull. And so I played it another half dozen times and then moved it on because I just didn't want to play it anymore. So that was Ethnos. A lot of people still love this game, wish it was reprinted. This was a command game that is surprisingly underproduced for a command game, but it ran its course for me. I didn't need a lot of plays out of it, but it's a lightweight game. A lot of people still love Ticket to Ride, and it does a lot of what Ticket to Ride does. So if that's a thing for you, then you might like this game too.
Yeah, this is one I've never tried. Now I just want to try to see how sad it's become for me.
I never tried it, and I don't want to.
You have, Chris. Actually, you did.
No.
You did. One of the first game days I ever invited Chris to. He probably doesn't remember this. With our friend Randy at the time, invited him to it. We taught this game. I was like, "This is an awesome game, Chris." And we played it, and he was like, "Yeah, that's kind of so
forgettable, I guess."
I remember that day. I absolutely do not remember that game. The only game I remember from that day was we played that werewolf social deduction
one night
game.
Ultimate Werewolf, which you hated
and
too.
I learned that I hate social deduction games.
It's amazing that Chris still plays board games with me. All right, well, cool. Well, that'll wrap up our list. So listen, we do get it wrong once in a while, but not as often as you might think. I think our hot takes are still usually pretty valid. Any final thoughts? Any kind of runners up that you guys wanted to mention?
I don't have a runner-up, but I do have a comment, and we'll get a chance to really see how good my predictions are. Last week, we did Thunder Road Vendetta. And even though this is a goofy dice chucker, I mean, it's not really quite the same caliber in terms of strategic planning and whatnot that the games we normally do. I have never had a game stick in my head as much as Thunder Road Vendetta did. I want this game so badly now. I want to play it with everybody that I know. I don't want to wait until the new reprint comes out, which I'm going to do. But I'm so tempted to go run down to my local game store, buy a copy of it, and then sell that when the reprint comes out, which I hopefully won't do. But I am so excited to play this game again. So I'm dying to see if I'm right or wrong on this one. So, a year from now, well, actually, given that it's going to be a reprint through crowdfunding, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, we'll look back at this episode and judge how right I got that one.
Well, I'm glad you're picking that one up, Chris. I can't wait to play your version. I had a couple. These are just a couple downer ones. These are both island board games. Coincidentally, Fireball Island was a Kickstarter I jumped on right at the beginning, super high on it, but it was more of a Kickstarter disappointment than anything. It was just cheap and plasticky. It didn't bring back that recall I had as a kid of playing this one with a thicker components and sturdier board. It felt like you were actually on like a chunky island with these big volcano balls rolling down at you, trying to knock you over. And then Dinosaur Island had the art by Quacks of Quedlinburg, which I loved, but it had these disjointed boards, these sectional boards that you put out there and flop those around, and then all these huge player boards where you're trying to build your DNA. And so a lot of the ideas are neat, but it's just so clunkily executed that the game quickly died down. I tried to have fun with it, drawing your meeples out of the bag and these hooligans come out and this and that. A lot of stuff that seems neat there, but it was really just a bunch of just clunky stuff that I couldn't get past. Should have been a fun game, but Dinosaur Island was also a big letdown.
Well, my one runner-up was a game called Asara, and I didn't talk about it, one, because I don't think anybody knows this game exists, but it's a really clever kind of card-based worker placement game where you're trying to build towers. And this game is really cool. It's great. And this is one of the first games I absolutely fell in love with when I started into this hobby, but also one of the first games that I realized after 4 or 5 plays that it just doesn't hold up to repeat plays. And I think it's still a well-loved game for people that have played it or know about it. But just, a game that it's not bad. You should check it out, but play it once or twice, and that's all you need to do.
Is this a Kiesling and Kramer game you talked about one time on the show?
Yeah, it might be those designers. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I think that's probably accurate. Yeah, in fact, I know that Shem Phillips, the designer from Garfield Games, he often mentions this as one of his favorite games. And I've heard him on a couple interviews talking about this game. Not a bad game. It's really some really clever stuff going on that kind of blew my mind when I was first getting into the hobby. But just a game that after 5 or 6 plays, I owned it. And I was like, yep, I don't need to play it anymore.
I think I remember you talking about this one is Kiesling and Kramer. And since I'm here, the publisher is Ravensburger. Yeah, 2010 game. Interested in this one because this one stood out because of those designers that I'm pretty fond of.
Nice. That'll wrap up this conversation. Before we end today, I do have a review to read on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. This does help people find the show. We're growing rapidly. Would love to continue doing that with your support and with your help. So share us with your friends, share us on social media, but give us a rating and a review if you enjoy the show. This was a 5-star review from Shrinky Feet, which I think is my favorite reviewer name that we've seen on Apple Podcasts. And the title was One of the Best. They said, like many others, this is one of the best podcasts on board gaming. I've dropped many others, but stick with you guys. I love to hear your opinions, banter, and thoughtful discussion, not only the hot topic for the night, but on the games getting to or leaving the table. Keep it up, y'all. It's great stuff. Thank you so much. Love hearing these every week. Every time one of these come in, I send Chris and Adam a text. I'm like, guys, we got another review today. So really makes our day when we see these. If you enjoy this show, would love it if you gave back to us and said some nice words. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, Ricky B.
Thank you.
All right. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.